Good morning and welcome to the Sunday Coffee Edition. Joining me again, my co-host, the future governor of Virginia, TK Eppley. Today's show, we're going to talk a little bit about how you go from failure to success. I'm your host, Dr. Dan Ford, and this is EchelonOrchid.
Guess who's back?
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, my friend. How are you?
Damn, it feels good to be a Michigangster.
You guys beat up on who yesterday?
Northern Illinois.
Yeah.
It was a massacre. I think it was 63-7.
They put a direction on that school because they have to tell you where it's at.
Yeah. So speaking of college football, I think this is I would just happen to be reading the sports, and so the missus originally went to Purdue, which I like to affectionately refer as Purdue, just because. But also probably never going to be one of our sponsors.
I say, hey, for all my Purdue friends out there, the next time you need a keynote speaker, remember what I did for you all in 18. Don't.
So
I'm not with him.
Yeah, I didn't know this about Purdue's marching band, but they've got some drum that has been around for 100 years and it's 10 feet tall.
Yeah, it weighs like 600 pounds, like 500 and change pounds as well.
Yeah. So they're playing here at Notre Dame, and Notre Dame, when they did renovations, they separated it to where the visitors now have a complete separate entrance.
Yeah.
But it's much smaller. It's only 8 feet. So Purdue's like, hey, can you give us permission to bring the drum in through the side to get? And they said no. Yeah. So this will be the first time. Yesterday was the first time since 1978 that Purdue has been without their drum for the marching band.
Is that where they got beat like a drum yesterday?
Oh no, probably not. I think the last time Purdue was decent was when Drew Brees was there.
Drew Brees was there, right? Yeah. It's an interesting campus. I went there in late November, early December, and it was already, the wind was already whipping across the tundra that is, that part of Indiana. And I just, having never been there before, contemplated it. But they have a lot of underground tunnels so that you don't have to expose yourself to the winter out there.
Yeah. So I thought it was a pretty not nice thing for a religious school to say no, for when they wanted Purdue there rather than being the other way around. Just thought it was a pretty shitty thing to do.
There's stories of like coaches wanting to paint the visitors' locker room pink and things like that. It's like everybody's looking for a little psychological advantage. And I don't know, I don't think Purdue was a big threat to beat Notre Dame yesterday. But it is interesting to see that they're like, no, we're not going to allow that.
Yeah, that was, which got me thinking is, okay, a lot of people need motivation for things. But actually, before we get into that, we were talking a little bit on the pre-show about, because it's in the news right now with Australia, basically telling the French, we don't want your subs. We're going to do this joint collaboration with the U.S. and the UK for nuclear-powered subs. And then I was like, well, that sounds legitimate to me. I mean, I think there's like overall, outside of like in the military, I think there's something like 14 nuclear power plants in the world, and that supplies, like, just those 14, something like, almost 20% of the power in the world.
Right.
Seems pretty efficient and pretty green to me. And then New Zealand coming out saying, well, since you're doing that, you're no longer allowed in our waters. We are a nuclear-free zone since 1980 something or something like that.
Here's the thing. Whether you disagree with it or not, New Zealand or any other country is free to say, we don't want you in our international waters for a variety of reasons, other than up to and including, hey, we think your uniforms are funny. Right? So like you said, I think it's a short-sighted statement on nuclear power. And I think as a nation here, even now, I think some of the most ardent green people are like, the natural, if you say where we're at with fossil fuels in the US, we've agreed never to put another coal-fired power plant in the country. Meanwhile, China and India have decided, hey, we're going to double down on it, which I think for the coal economy of the US is good, because I live near where that thing that gets put onto ships and goes over there, that there's still a vibrant market for their product, whether you agree or not that it should be used. But, I think when you start talking about, really what they're talking about is, they want to be completely green. Right. And so I think it's an admirable goal. And I think we all need to work there. And I think in the since 2015, 16, the US in particular has done more to lessen the carbon footprint of the country than any other country on earth. Right. And it's a fact that goes unknown. Right. And I think when we talk about it, it's how quickly do you want to tilt towards that? The more you tilt towards getting green more quickly, the more financial peril you can put your nation in. Right. And so that step is, if I believe, hey, we want to get off coal and most the liquid petroleum products that we currently use, what's the next step? There's two options. Well, they're not mutually exclusive, but one is natural gas, and it puts us in a distinct advantage to be energy independent if we exploit all the natural gas that we have in America. And the other is nuclear. And even some of the most ardent things with modern power plants, with everything today, they're like, well, at some point we actually have to do this, because the amount of fuel that's left over, when it's spent, is negligible compared to what people think it is. It's not, it's a basketball, not a beach ball, right? Type of thing. And so I think just like anything else, and probably more so than a lot of things, when we start talking about energy independence and power and how we're going to fuel the world, it's sometimes there's not about the technology. It's not about what makes sense. It's an emotional reaction to, I'm a better person than you are because I want to do this. Where a conservative estimate, if we went green, if you believe the wildest claims of some of the really radicals of the movement, up to and including AOC, where she got loose on, we have 12 years before the planet explodes. All right. It's a wildly inaccurate statement. And there's a certain segment of the population that's going to hear that and believe that. Right. If that were true, there'd be no mortgages no mortgages written or houses insured within 100 miles of the coast right now.
Yeah.
Because if you talk a 10-foot sea level rise, all that's gone. Right. And so just from a basic financial model, no financial institution is going to insure something that they know is going to lose. Right. I mean, I have a friend of mine, he's a former SEAL as well. His father used to run the Center for Naval Analysis, retired test pilot, just really extremely intelligent individual. And when he got out, he created a business where they would go and for a bridge example, they would go and calculate statistically when that bridge would collapse, so the insurance company could insure right up to about a week before that.
Right.
That's what insurance companies do. They're in the business to make money. They're not in the business to replace stuff. All right. And if you look just from just basic common sense, this isn't going to happen, because if there were no insurance company, my home in Virginia Beach would not be getting insured.
Yep. So this always gets me, like people when they say like nuclear is extremely efficient and by all accounts green, right? Like
Yep.
You're taking like and all the scientists basically say like we have an unlimited supply of uranium.
Right.
The next most efficient, I believe, is like hydropower.
Right.
But I'm really you gotta have that one doesn't have as easy a way, I believe, as supplying the whole world. But nuclear, I can, and it'll get us. I think there's not a whole lot going on in Montana. Let's put a couple more nuclear power plants.
Well, I was going to say that I think one of the big advancements, aside from like just the technology of how you build a nuclear power plant and how you make it safe, and with modern computing and everything like that, and modern fail safes, but how what's it going to take to regrid the system, right? We have a tremendous cybersecurity problem with the power grid because of how it was designed in the 50s. You know, the latest iteration was probably, I think the 60s was the last time they did any kind of modernization.
I'll give you one good way that we could secure it. Don't allow access from the internet to it.
Right. Well, but that's then, you know, you're what we're talking about is regridding the country.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And if you can basically put power plants that are not sitting on fault lines or near fault lines, right? You reduce Fukushima was a big problem, was that whole, you know, all of Japan is near or on fault lines. Right. So let's not put a power plant on the San Andreas Fault. And like you say, let's put it on solid rock. Anything on directly on either side of the Rockies, for example, you know, and in the Midwest, and then regrid, you're still talking about a massive expense.
Actually, I'd be okay putting a nuclear power plant on the San Andreas Fault.
Please stop. just please stop. All right. We're just,
it could solve a lot of problems.
No, it can create a lot more. So, but yes, you're talking about regridding, right? And then at that point, then it's an intranet, not an internet, right? Yeah. And again, it's like there's the cost benefit analysis, right? And then what do? I take a shortcut by wanting to know and have access. Everybody wants information, so all these things get out there. And once you do, now you create a vector of attack, right? And how are we limiting this? And we're driving deep into the 21st century. I don't think anybody's going to advocate for not being able to have like a global view of what's going on with our energy.
Right? Yeah, and thinking about the regridding, I mean, my immediate thought was the reason why it hasn't happened, and we've been talking about the grid being a problem for 20 years,
right?
Is because I don't believe any politician is going to get elected on that type of a platform, and they also don't believe they're going to be in a political position by the time it would finish.
Well, so that's the bigger issue, right? I want to solve problems in conjunction with the election cycle, not in conjunction with what's right for America.
Right.
That's politicians all over the world, right? We just happen to live here, so it's of concern to us. But that's the thing, you know. It's the age-old political argument.
Because it would probably take, if I had to imagine, if we started today, somewhere between 7 to 10 years to complete that project.
And that's if you have the full will of the government and the American people behind it, demanding it. Right? I mean, I think that's, you know, and that is, I think, probably the bigger problem rather than any technology hurdles we may have.
Yeah, I mean, it's I don't believe so. It's so much the time. I mean, it just takes time to roll those things out, and we have to stop. You know, as much as I like to, that I don't really like Elon Musk. What he did with SpaceX is what everyone should be doing, which is that first principles design thinking. Stop trying to iterate on what's currently there because it's going to take longer.
Right.
Imagine what the solution would be if we were trying to stand up an electrical, power grid, in 10 years from now, like brand new country
and void of a current power grid.
Yeah.
Right. Not like how are we going to bolt this thing onto the current power grid, void of a power grid. How do we make a power grid?
Right.
Right. Void of a car. How do we make a car?
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. And so that I just don't, that's a shortcoming, I guess. Also,
but here's the thing: Elon Musk learned his lesson, right, with Tesla, because Tesla originally they were trying to take the Lotus Esprit and turn it into this electric supercar.
Right.
Well, when they did that and put the battery in there, everything was so much heavier and everything that structurally that little Lotus Esprit frame couldn't take it. So they were trying to iterate. They weren't trying to do design thinking. Then he said, okay, we're almost going broke doing what we're doing. Let's stop what we're doing. And if there were no other cars on the planet, how would we build an electric car? Because at the time, there were no other electric cars on the planet. How are we going to do that?
Right.
And so it wasn't like he was, some design thinking genius. He was forced into it because what I tried didn't work. right? I mean, it's like, and one of the things we want to talk about today is how do you get to success from failure, right? And that's a good example, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, right now there's only 2 car companies in America that have never gone bankrupt: Tesla, and who's the other one?
I don't know. I want to say Ford.
You're correct, right?
Yeah.
Because Mullally was forward thinking and leading up to 2008, and mortgaged everything, including the Ford logo, to some private equity firm, I believe, VC or something. He mortgaged everything he had to get enough cash.
Right.
The only reason he flew to DC when GM and Chrysler CEOs went there was to make sure that they didn't cut a side deal that would hurt him in the long run.
Yep.
Right. And Congress was incensed when they kind of snottily asking, well, how much money do you need? He's like, nothing. I just want to make sure you guys don't cut a side deal with them that puts me out of business. Right. You look back in the 70s and what Lee Iacocca did. I mean, if you're going to say we're going to save American businesses, that's a great model. Hey, I took the money, I paid it all back. All right. They just gave them a loan. Right. And every now and then in business, you need to have capital. Right. And so what do you wait? Their banker just happened to be Uncle Sam. But when you think about it, I think a lot of the lessons that are now what are considered to be institutionalized thinking at Elon Musk's companies are, they were born and informed out of them trying to, basically slice a Lotus in half and put all the batteries in it.
Yeah.
All right. Which I love that story.
Yeah, it's definitely a good one. But I'm going to touch on one thing just because you mentioned AOC, and I just have to bring this up. How can you have the audacity of wearing a dress that says "tax the rich" when you're going to an event that costs $35,000 to get into?
Well, being self-aware is an art, right? I mean, that's but I mean, like, it's not just her, right? I mean, I'm talking people, on the other side of the coin. This week, you've got Nicki Minaj coming out voicing her opinion on, on the pandemic vaccines and whether they work or not. But it was a political statement, and everybody marshaled, to quickly try to, cancel her and quell her out because, when we talk about it, what's free speech, right? AOC has the right to be completely non-self-aware and do that. I don't have to agree with it, but it's not like I don't hate her because of it or anything like that. I disagree with her opinions on most things, but yeah, so she was largely unaware of herself, as a lot of people are. And Nicki Minaj is perfectly within her providence to say, I don't think this works as it's advertised, and we should do more research, or we should do whatever, right? But again, one, ignores what we assume to be free speech now is truncated.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's the bigger problem. AOC, she'll have her day and she'll go on about her business, right? Because people that don't get it usually don't realize they don't get it. And after a while, that loses steam, and they're often hopefully replaced by somebody that's more competent.
Right. And speaking of the shot, for those, because I mean, I know that I follow quite a bit of Dr. Rhonda Patrick. Yep. She was on the Joe Rogan podcast and explaining quite a bit about the shot and some of the misconceptions from a research standpoint. And I think she largely sums it up as, hey, look, this is a risk-based decision for you. That's what this comes down to. And I really think that the government should kind of stay out of that risk-based decision. University of Michigan recently released some research talking about some natural immunity that's occurring. There's multiple things, and I thought it was really articulate as to how she put things out, and another great point. She goes, okay, there's some things that have happened to people that have gotten the shot. There's some things that happened to people when they didn't get the shot. And she explained how there was 2 different test aspects that they did with the Pfizer and Moderna. They gave a human dose of the shot to the rats, and then they measured, every so often what the I don't know exactly what it was, but basically we'll say the half-life, because I can't really think of a better word, from the liver. She goes, that's what matters, is to how quickly this is getting to the liver and out of your system and clean. And a certain percentage of the rats, of course, didn't necessarily make it because they gave them a human-sized dose in this rat.
Toxicity.
Because they wanted to go extreme to see what's going to happen. And a certain percentage of them died. She said was still small, negligible. And most of the rats, the liver did what it was supposed to do, and everything was fine. And then they gave a animal equivalent dose to the mice, and no issues. And that's part of how they did it, to figure out what's safe, what's not. She goes, but we've given 150 million of these shots, and large part, very few, things from 150 million shots going out. I think it's a pretty remarkable science, regardless of whatever anyone's risk tolerance might be. I advised my parents to get it because they're old and they have some health conditions that they needed to do it. But I don't believe the government should be telling any of us how to handle our health.
Well, that's true. I mean, and again, here's the thing. If you're in relatively good health, the opportunity for you to get sick and die is very low, right? And I think the third rail in this country is when we talk about obesity, right? And I think that's some of the stuff I've been reading lately is, there's an inverse relationship between, or a direct relationship between the circumference of your waist against your height as to how likely you are to get it, right? And we don't, if you're obese and I come up to you and say, hey, I want to help save your life, right? But you're a beautiful human being, but you're going to die if you keep on this course you're in. That's not fat shaming, right? Making fun of somebody because they're fat is fat shaming, right? Yeah. But I think we have this, with this in particular, I think the thing where people go mental on both sides is you're being told there's only one course of action. And if anybody says, well, hey, I think we should look at some other things, then we don't do it. Right? We shut those people out, and their opinion is not valued. Right? And when the White House is getting on there saying, hey, we're reaching out to Nicki Minaj. Why? Because she's an influencer with millions of followers, and more people might actually ask questions.
Well,
right?
I mean, it makes it really easy when you've got someone going, an attack on Fauci is an attack on science.
Right.
When you've got those kind of things out there.
Right. Here's the thing. It might be completely safe, right? It might not be safe because we don't have the efficacy of a full round of testing. I also understand the emergency use authorization idea for if there was the actual plague and we had an actual vaccine for the plague, right? Where it's a death sentence, right? That's, that in my mind is what the EUA is all about. Yeah. Right? We're not, here's the thing, and this comes down to one thing. I don't care whether you believe in the vaccine or not. If you want to go get it, great. If you don't want to go get it, that's fine too, right? But and this is with a lot of things in our country now, there's a complete lack of transparency.
Yeah, absolutely true.
Right? And that lack of transparency is what makes people scared. And a panicked population is not a good thing, right? And if you tell me that walking around out in the fresh air with a mask on is the way I've got to live, I'm not doing that, right? Because it doesn't make any sense to me, and we have more than casual evidence that all of these masks don't work, right? And it various times Fauci said they don't work, and then he recant. You know what I mean? But those types of statements panic people.
It does. And because they weren't, as you said, they weren't transparent about it. And getting into that aspect of which was really interesting for what Rhonda was saying was that if you have more than one morbidity factor, then the chances of you having a reaction to the shot increases. And she said, right, and she goes, also, if you happen to get, SARS, then your increase is even higher. And so, and she goes, basically, you need to eliminate all of the morbidity factors. Like the only one you don't have much control over is age.
Right.
But
here's
all
the thing:
other,
if you're in the better shape you're in, the older you are, the better shape you're in. Especially when it comes to lean muscle mass, the less age matters.
Yeah.
Right. Trust me, I'm 155 years old. I know.
Yeah, you know,
I know what I'm talking about.
You've gone through a couple of different plagues.
Right. 1919 was horrible. Right. And but that's, this is, in what I believe to be the ultimate irony. We're talking about getting people safe, and yet we're giving people donuts and everything else to go get the shot.
Yeah, I
right. And I don't tell people how to live their lives, but if you're in a position where you're immunocompromised and you're not doing everything you can do to save your own life, it's hard. It's not that I'm not empathetic, because I'll always be empathetic. Sometimes I'm not sympathetic.
Yeah, and I get that, you and I are in a different financial category than a lot of other people, but there's some things that, people can do. Like, so as an example, I just recently went and got an entire full body scan, but with it's called like thermography. It's basically done with
It's like a DEXA scan.
Yeah. And it's not super expensive. It was like $300. But I'm going, one, so if anyone out there, if you have either flexible spending or health savings account, it's covered under that. So, you can use that to do that. But it's extremely important, because then you can take those results back to your primary care and go, okay, it says here I need a couple of these tests that need to get done. Then you can start, getting, healthy. But of course, part of that is, we need a certain amount of exercise a day. And I would really wish that, the government would, they spend enough money and waste enough money that, and this was something that, again, Joe Rogan has said, what I thought was, somewhat brilliant. Why isn't the government putting out their own YouTube channel and just doing some things about exercise and proper nutrition?
But here's the thing. This is a discussion where you think, why is that? Right? That's a whole nother show. Right? Oh, yeah. We're at a stage, and this is my list. Like, I've done where I've had tests from, I'm not going to use the name of the clinic, but they do I believe too, I like the idea of those scans, right? And I also like the idea of regular blood work. But completely understanding all the information that you can grab from the multitude of blood tests that you can get is hugely important, right? When you go in for a physical and they talk to you for 15 minutes, they weigh you, they take your blood pressure, they have you turn your head and cough, and then they want to do a PSA check. If you're regularly giving blood to be tested, there's so many factors that you can break down, and some of the old thinking. Number one, food pyramid broken.
Oh yeah.
Right. And you please at me with that if you want to disagree. And this concept of, like, even just basic cholesterol, right? We use HDL, LDL, and a number, and that drives putting people on statins and other drugs, right? Well, there's significantly more data just that you can glean from that says, it's like we used to think margarine was healthier than butter, right? Well, margarine is just a chemical mess. But now we know more about butter, right? And this is when it goes back to the science of the pandemic and everything else. Right?
I put butter in my coffee. I can't get enough fat into my diet right now.
Right, but again, that's what type of fat you're using. Grass-fed, grass-fed. Eating is the number one thing we're doing to kill ourselves.
Oh yeah,
right. But again, you go back. What does the government approve for us to put in our bodies? Like, there's I'll even take something off the wall, like Fireball whiskey. It's got glycol in it. You can't go buy it in the EU because in a rare occurrence of sanity, the EU says, hey, it's probably not good for humans to drink antifreeze.
No, and I'll give you a hint. A lot of the Sazerac brand has shitty whiskey and has the glycerol in it. It also provides that mouthfeel for people.
Right, but again,
and if I haven't said it enough, fuck Sazerac. I don't want them to be a sponsor.
But it's like, hey, I'm not. It's like you don't have to do everything. right? You don't have to work out 6 days a week, but you have to do something, right? And everybody says the working out part is the hard part. No, it's not. The eating right part is the hard part.
Oh, absolutely. Because
Right?
we have a sugar problem in this
Yeah.
country.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
No, and that causes inflammation and a whole bunch of other, it creates a chain that gets us to where, again, it's like you just look at some people and go, dude, I really feel badly for you because you're not doing what you can do to stay alive.
Yeah.
Right? But what's going to happen is big pharma is going to continue to make things chronic by people walking in, having an easy button they can push, they can take a pill, and now they don't have to change their behavior, and this will tamp it down enough to where it's not a death sentence at 60.
Right.
Right. And I've had friends of mine get absolutely mad when I'm like, hey, this is the problem. Like, stop eating. If you're like, don't do that. Right. If this is your problem, right? When I was not long after I retired, we were working together, and for arthritis and a bunch of other stuff, I was on a lot of medicines. And one day I'm like, no, you have to do something different. Right. And now it was after a whole bunch of other stuff, but it's like, hey, at some point I have to save my own life. Right. And I joke around, I want to live to break the world record. Right. But I don't want to do it in a wheelchair drooling on the trophy. Right. And this, and I'll say this to everybody. I said, don't skip leg day, because leg day is a metaphor for life. You're going to have weight on your shoulders. It's going to push you down. Standing back up is how you end up being successful in life. Right. Plus, all the systems of your body get activated when you're doing squats, deadlifts, all of those things. I advise everybody to go get a trainer for at least a little bit to show you how to execute all these movements safely so you don't end up hurting yourself. And I'm not advocating that you've got to go out and lift Olympic quantities of weight, but you have to put your body under strain for it to grow, for your immune responses to take up and everything like that. And that is, 78% of people in America are considered to be overweight to morbidly obese, right? And it's a number I had heard, and I had really not put anything to. And then as they were opening up things last year, they did it was 100, 200,000 people from around the country, different age groups and everything as a method of research, how they executed that survey. I thought they did a really good job. And 78% of respondents said we shouldn't open up gyms right away.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I remember this. Yeah.
Right. And so I'm like, where did I hear that number before? And I went in and found it. Right. But even like the gym I go to, in the early days when it was opened up, it was, hey, you're supposed to wipe your weights off. Now the gym had done what they did. They put in a brand new super, air exchanger to keep fresh air in there. And then everybody was extremely diligent about wiping all the contact surfaces off. And almost to the point where it's self-policing, because if somebody didn't do it, I watched somebody go hand somebody a rag and say, hey, go back and wipe your stuff down. Right? Why? Because it was a like-minded community of people who did not want it to get shut down. Right? And I think that's what in the global picture, where people are so confused, scared, happy, angry, right, about everything, because there's been a complete lack of transparency. And because of that lack of transparency and the fact that you're not allowed to have a discussion that something other than the vaccine is the way to go, that keeps us from being able to get to that shared community piece where we can say, hey, we're going to agree to disagree on some things, because it's not a one size fits all answer. Right. And I think that's the bigger problem. That's it's not about the shot anymore. It's about the social problem that we have of people not being able to accept other people's points of view and say, look, under this circumstance, there's no way you should mandate that. Right. And I think that's really, when you get down to it, it's the bigger issue.
Yeah. And I think to me, it's definitely a bigger issue. And I'm glad it's, the discussion's going in this direction, because especially when we start talking about, failure and success, the first thing is why it's I don't call it a vaccine. It's not a vaccine. A vaccine is like the measles, mumps, rubella, vaccine that we give people, or polio. Those things were eradicated. Right. This is not a vaccine. Like, you're not killing it. In all you're doing is giving your, it's an immune system and, booster, so to speak. And so I can't, that's another reason why I don't feel like the government should be mandating something that's not truly a vaccine. I think it does help a lot of people, and in terms of mainly because most people in the United States have 3 morbidity factors in there, and therefore I think it helps those people.
Right.
And so, but we don't do enough of that, as you're talking about. Too many people skip leg day. So I think. So I was watching some stuff about Kobe Bryant the other day, and maybe the only person that had a better work ethic than Kobe might have been Michael Jordan, but I doubt it. I think they're probably the same. So Kobe Bryant's in the gym, and I can't remember who it was that came in, but whoever the superstar is on the other team.
Jay Williams.
Oh yeah, there it is.
I know this video. I love this story.
Yeah, and Kobe Bryant's in there and guys like, man. So I do my workout and I turn around because I still hear the basketball bouncing, and there's Kobe again. He's still there, like he hasn't left. And he's like, I go shower. I see Kobe after the game, and I'm like, hey, like, how long were you? Why were you there so much? He goes, well, I would have left earlier, but I saw you come in, and so I wanted you to know that you were never going to be able to outwork me.
Right. That's after he dropped 40 on him that night.
Yeah.
So to balance it out with a Michael Jordan story, so Tony Robbins was interviewing Michael Jordan years ago, and he's like, talk about what drives him, what makes it great, how do you think? He goes, who motivates you, what motivates you? And he goes, I didn't make my high school basketball team when I was a sophomore. I got cut. And he goes, and from that day on, I learned that the expectations I place on myself are much greater than anybody else could ever put on me. And that's what drives me every day of the week. Same outcome, but a little different view, right? But they both wanted the world to know you're not going to outwork me,
right?
Because when it gets down, when it sucks, like when you're down on the ground and life sucks, how are you getting up and why?
Yeah, and I think that, so the first part of the aspect of failure to success is, what are some things that I think that why people don't ever go to the success? It's hard. They allow that inner voice in them to go, no, stay in bed for another hour.
Right.
It's okay. You're going to be okay. I think that's the worst thing that, I could ever hear is like, oh, it's going to be okay. No, it's not if I keep going down that path, because what solutions rarely have the same path as what the failure took, right? You had to do something different. And I think leg days is a great metaphor that people are like, nope, that's too hard. It's only too hard if you allow it to be too hard. I can't tell you how many people have said, I can't believe you're looking to get into, making, spirits. It's oversaturated. I'm like, no, we have an oversaturation of big box brands that are making poor product.
Right. A lot of people say that about craft beer makers 10, 15 years ago, and look at the vibrant industry that you have across the US now.
Yeah.
And guess what? People that make crappy beer are falling by the wayside. The people that make good beer and have a good business plan and understand quality still means something, they're growing at the pace they can grow.
Yeah. I mean, it's been I've probably now, I don't know, I haven't read all of them, but I mean, just sitting here, right? I've got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 different books on spirit making of some type, right? And the reason why they're books and not like in a Kindle is because these books are old and there's no Kindle edition. Otherwise, I've got a bunch of I do have some newer ones that are in a Kindle edition.
Right.
So, you've got to, I think the people who never go from failure to success never want to try something new. They want to stay with the tried and true and this is how we've always done it.
Well, there you go. People will say that in business all the time. Well, we've always done it this way. Well, great. Navy metaphor is like, let's take the nuclear reactors out of carriers and put sails back up there and see how far we get. right? And it's that way with everything. And I have a different view of failure to success today than I did 5 years ago. And yeah, I think we've talked about it, or you and I've talked about it personally, but having a failure later in life is crushing for people, right? And to get back to success, if you've never, everybody has failure in the micro, right? Learning how to overcome the daily failures, right? That's what a lot of people don't learn anymore, right? And I think that people are shielded from failure. We shield our kids from failure. We don't ever want them to not make the team, to not get a bad grade, right? Well, average GPA of a billionaire is 2.9. You know why? Because they're not thinking about following the rules in school. They're thinking about doing something great. That by necessity requires you to think way outside of any confines that people can put up for you, right? And if you're going to do anything and you're going to be great, you're going to be misunderstood, right? You're going to be angry, right? Because you want to get somewhere. And I think in the kind of the era I grew up in as a kid, you didn't make the team. If you got a bad grade, you were held accountable for it, not the school system, like in large measure happens now. And then moving on to going through SEAL training, the numbers are stacked against you, right? And you've heard me say this at public events. Like, people are like, how'd you make it through SEAL training? I didn't quit, right? And they're like, well, it's got to be harder than that. I go, no, it's not harder than that. It's more complicated than that, right? And it's learning how to create in yourself a mindset of success and what you'll tolerate, right? Quitting at anything is all about how quickly you want to get comfortable. Right. And if you're going to be, and I'll tell you from the time I had a big failure, and nobody would look at it like that except for me. Right. I realized two things. I've helped a lot of people in the world, right? In what my world is over time. And I would never change that, because I think it's very important to be a good human being. What I found out, though, is that for the most part, even some people that are extremely close to me, nobody wanted any part of dealing with my failure. I was also told to accept anything to get moving forward, which I was not willing to do. Right? I was willing to tolerate failure. Yes, was I angry? Did I have a lot of adverse emotions that today I can still get angry about? Yes, but I wasn't willing to accept less because I knew I didn't have to. Did I think it was going to take as long as it took to get back to where I think I'm doing that? Yeah, yes, it absolutely did. But am I upset that I did it that way? Absolutely not. Because in doing that, you keep the strength. Some of the people that were advocating that, I think I'm like, well, do you think I'm not working on this and I'm not trying? It's like, no, we know you're busting your ass, right? And it's about putting yourself in a position every day to be successful. It doesn't guarantee you're going to have success. It guarantees you're giving yourself the opportunity, right? And so one of the reasons that a few years ago I really got back into fitness and really in that grind was like, I felt physically I wasn't, and I too started to say, hey, I'm getting older, and you can make excuses about not putting yourself in the best position to be successful. Right. One of my excuses, well, hey, I'm getting old. I'm beat up and everything from life. Right. Having been a SEAL, I'm beat up. And one day I said, I'm not going to use that excuse anymore. Right. I'm absolutely not going to use that excuse. And so I started doing something about it. And I went from taking quite a few medicines for arthritis and blood pressure and everything like that to all I take right now is a low dose blood pressure, like the lowest dose you can have. And my doctor's like, I think we're just going to get you off that because I'm been consistent now over time. Well, why? Because I changed, I physically changed who I am into somebody that can sustain large quantities of effort, both physical and mental, and is more, and also get back to the do as I do, not as I say. Right. And that's an internal thing. That's an internal mechanism thing. Right. And you are going to lose people along the way. Right. If you're truly going to be successful, you're going to lose people along the way.
Of course. So,
right?
this, maybe I already know the answer or don't. So what was the failure?
When kind of how I wasn't, and I blamed other people for this. I was not cognizant enough of how much damage was going to be done to me when I left SC. Right? That's the failure, right? It's what people have the ability to do to you, and if you don't recognize it, that's your failure, right? And I didn't recognize that as was happening, and even other people that are familiar with it, they didn't recognize it either, and they were also defending bad behavior, right?
Yeah, I thought that's what it was.
And then I got angry because that's the first time, and I literally, and for those of you, I had to start over, like new network, new everything. The one place I could always go get a job was where that company was in that city. And all of a sudden that completely closed off to me.
Yeah.
Right? And I was told this very flippantly, just go get a new network. Because that's easy. That works well. Right. And those are the things that really made me angry over time. Right. But then it was like, okay, I'm not as bad as you are about like laying in wait for a human being that's wronged you for decades. And the thing that really bothers me the most about all of this is it turned me into that person. Right? That's, when you start talking about overcoming failure, it's about eliminating a lot of that.
So do you think in that particular instance of whether or not, I don't know if you did this or not, do you think forgiveness in your it allowed you to then move on?
I don't think it's forgiveness. I think you don't have to forgive somebody to move on. Right? You have to have a certain amount of intellectual amnesia or emotional amnesia to be able to move on. But I also think holding on to a bit of that keeps me going. Right. And I always say motivation's a waste of time. You need discipline. Right. And I think overall I got back in and I started winning again because even when I was at my worst, right, I still was disciplined about the process of working on it all the time. And yeah, doing some things I didn't want to do to build consistency while continuing to look for something else. Right. And I think my biggest failing on this is I expect, and this is a highly successful people. This is a very part. They expect other people to act like they would act, right? And some of people that are most important folks I have in my life, they wouldn't do that. It's not emotionally connected for them to do that, right? And then emotionally in me, that's a big, hard thing to understand. It's like, wait a second, there's no way you should have done it. And you did it for pick a selfish reason in my mind. And I'm not saying they're selfish, but that's how I classified it.
Sure.
Right? And pick a selfish reason. And it's like, I can hold on to that. But I think the other thing too, highly successful people have is the ability to compartmentalize. Right? I have a very, very high ability to compartmentalize. And what I found in the aftermath of that, I wasn't doing that. Right. And when I like to be where I'm at today and I'm on the path of men where I consider myself to be back into, thing, and effectively gave up 5 years of my work life or 4 years of my work life to get there, is I can compartmentalize. Every now and then the door opens, shit creeps out, and I get worked up about it. But on a day-to-day basis, I can segregate that to be successful. Now that's 20 years of doing what I used to do when I was in the Navy, but I can literally block everything else out and go, okay, now I can focus. And I think highly successful people can take and what I call thin slice your life. You thin slice your life into what you have to do right then. All right. And if I'm to the point now where if somebody, and it's hard, right? If you tell me that you're there for me and that you're a thing and you're not, okay, I'm going to go, you're not. Right. And that's hard for me because there's, people that you want to have and you want to hold and you want to love and you want to think. And it's like, if it's not your kids, like you have the option to say, get out of here.
Mhm.
Right. And and executing on that option is sometimes the most difficult thing that you can do.
It really is, and this is why I say, hey, look, I can count my friends on
Right.
like one hand.
Yeah.
Maybe sometimes I have the second hand.
You don't have to get down to wearing sandals is the point.
Yeah, I say this and it works in business and it works in when it comes to your friends. Don't count how many friends you have. Make sure the friends that you have count.
Right. And that's the thing is I've never thought I've had this massive circle. Right. And and again, on a daily basis, it doesn't bother me. Right. In the SEAL community, you have 3 levels of people. You have great operators, you have good drinking buddies, and then you have a good neighbor. Right. I have a lot of good neighbors in my life.
Yeah.
I've got a considerable smaller amount of good drinking buddies. And then that core group of people that I consider to be, no matter what you do in life, if I look at you and go, hey, you're a professional, you're killing it, I want to hang out with you. Right. But life is not a one-way street. Right. And for the most part, here's the thing. If you don't even have to say thank you to me. Right. I think it makes me feel better to be able to give myself to people. Right. But there's some days where it's like, wait a second, like, I have a buddy of mine. Every time he calls me up now, I go, hey, what do you want? Right. I've known him for 30 years. And I'm just to the point now where it's like he never calls unless he needs something from me. Right. And I'm not doing it to be mean. I'm doing it to like, look, I know you to be a different person and that you can be a different person. And I want to help you get there. Right.
When you give of yourself, you're not the thanks isn't what you're looking for. You're looking on a return on that investment, not back to yourself, but back to the world.
Correct.
Like, I'm giving you this, so
right.
I expect you to give X amount to the world. And
right.
That's a true being, thank you by you going and doing these work. So I helped you, so you should be able to go help 10 other people.
Right. And there's a certain thing, like, after a while, and it's a natural human, like you help people, you're there for people all the time. And then when you ask them for something, all of a sudden nothing's ever in their ability or their sphere to do it. Or there's an excuse as to why it can't be done. Right. That angers that. I'm not telling you I'm right. I'm just telling you, like, emotionally, then don't consider me your friend. Right. Because I'm not going to ask you. I'm very rarely going to ask you for things. But when I do, because my nature, like, and this is the thing, is I'd rather go out and help people. Right. But every now and then, and I hadn't needed this for a long time, and I'm really out of practice. At the time I was really out of practice of saying, hey, I need help. Right. And my normal response is just to get quiet. Right. And that doesn't work either. Right. Because at some point you've got to think. I have a friend of mine. We've been friends since 1987. And, we both checked into SEAL Team 2 the same day. He was going in as an intel guy, and I was coming in as a young frogman. And we've just been friends ever since. He ended up becoming an EOD guy. And, we're in a hurry to help each other. Right. And I mean that in the best way possible. Right. And it's not like every day, it's not anything, but and it's like you and I, like if I called you up and I literally had something really tragic bad happen, I know you drop what you're doing and show up, and vice versa.
Yeah.
Right. There's not many people in anybody's life like that. Right. And when you have 2 or 3, then you've got a plethora. Right. And I think, but for the most part, when we talk about failure to success or success to failure to success, right, I think that's harder than saying, hey, I've not achieved. Right. How do I get to achievement? Right. And those are easier things. To have wild success, have it all taken away, and then to get back to where you're having wild success or building wild success again. Because I don't think anybody says that has kind of taken a dip and they're coming back is I want that success immediately. No, I want the opportunity. Right. And that's, I think, when you look at people that have had a failure in their life, it's that opportunity was taken away from them. Right. That's internally what motivates people, or not. Right. You said, or that people just sit and wallow in their own morass. Right. I will tell you that over time, I got angry because I was like, it just shouldn't be this hard. Right. But it was. right? And largely because I kept it to myself. We're in a very tight knit group of people that, because I knew most people don't care. What appalled me was some people I thought really were invested in a relationship that we've had. They didn't care either, right? And I think in the larger, like if I'm gonna, the one thing I've kind of taken from all this is now I'm really into, like, when somebody says to me, "Hey, I need your help," right? I want to know why. I want to know the back. I'm not saying I'm not going to help you, but I'm more prepared to help people that are like had success or struggling and how to get back and how to shortcut the system, because I didn't know how to shortcut it. Right. And some of it was my own emotional ignorance, my own hard-headedness and everything like that. But, I'll this is a statement from, SEAL community. Like, we never do anything alone. Right. That there's a minimum standard for physical fitness and being able to do your job, jumping, all that stuff. So that's never in play. If I'm one of the slowest runners, but I passed the run, and one of the fastest runners passed it faster than me, it doesn't matter, because we both passed. Right. And we recognize everybody's different. But in SEAL training and throughout the entirety of your career, you get graded as a group. Right. You get graded as the brotherhood, right? Whatever that group is. And so to me, that has always been hugely important, right? It's the idea of, I'm not going to let the guy left of me or right of me down, right? And that's important. What I thought I had done since getting out was build that brotherhood. And what I found out is it's very limited. It's not the last guy who I thought was in the brotherhood, or the person is not there, right? And so there's the amount of times my phone is incoming with those people is decreased. Right. And sometimes you just have to manage the one or two relationships that absolutely you don't want to end, but that haven't met what you consider to be your emotional or intellectual needs and stuff like that. How do I do that? Right. I think I'm much more well equipped to do that, and in some cases demand that from people, right, as a minimum standard. Right. And I think a lot of people, when they fail, they start accepting from people whatever they can give in the hopes that that little bit will be the panacea, right? When it's not. And it's like, okay, fine, I'm going to back up, and I'm going to put myself in a position to be able to drive forward, right? And then once you start having minor success, it builds on that, right? And it's easier when you take 2 steps forward, take 1 step back, rather than get pushed all the way back down the staircase and have to start over again, right? And I think those are the, things. And you start having fun with the people that are helping you build, right? And I think that's, and again, it comes back to that empathy and accountability, right? But I think where people lose that is on themselves, right? They beat themselves up every day, and then they stop being accountable because they're not empathetic to themselves, and then then that snowball starts rolling down the hill, and it gets pretty big. So.
It does, and this is where I always go back, to whether it be my employees, my students, myself. I go right back to Kipling's "If," treat triumph and disaster as the same two imposters.
Right.
So I always, regardless of, I've got the nice bottle of whiskey that typically lasts longer than a year, because it only ever comes out when I had something amazing happen or really shitty happen.
Right.
And the first time that I had that shitty thing happen, the missus was like, "Well, you didn't have a good day." I'm like, "I know, but I do this because it is a symbol of reminding myself that I've had better days. This too shall pass."
Right.
And when my 1 ounce of that whiskey is gone, okay, it doesn't matter if it's success or failure, I'm done with it. And then
I actually think that's more important with success.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, people like, I only like, outside of giving people a hard time that I'm friends with, when they're like, "Oh, Mr. Ford," I'm like, "Hey, look, I didn't go to all those years of evil doctor school to be called Mr."
Exactly.
When my name's in print, put my credentials. Outside of that, I got it up on the wall. I know I did it. So I don't need to be reminded. I'm only looking at what's happening next. And
Right.
and then we'll take the distillery. And so when people tell me, hey, this can't be done, well, no one's going to outwork me. So there was many a days over the last year where, hey, I was up 4 o'clock in the morning reading everything I could about a distillery, because the president of the American Distillers Institute says that he will buy dinner for anyone that can get their distillery up and running in less than 2 years. I'm at month 11. And that was because this is not complicated. It's just complex.
Right.
Let's figure out the steps, and I'm only focusing on the next step. I'm going to give 100% of my attention, of what I have available to that next step, whatever that is. And
right.
when that's done,
it's critical path thinking.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. And then just keep on moving forward. There were so many bumps along the way. Like my biggest one right now, which is I'm having a challenging time resolving this, because as you had mentioned, that failure wasn't a direct causal action that you did. It was what someone else did to you, and it took you a while to realize all those things going around. Well, I've got this general contractor, who didn't file for a permit, evidently, for the plumbing and the mechanical. And so when they come to do their, inspection, you see this big, huge trench drain. Well, so it means that was definitely not new. It was definitely new, and a big, huge vent that's going out the side of the building. So the city's there, and not only did they not get a permit, they used someone that wasn't licensed to do the work.
Oh, the guy they subbed out.
Yep. And so now the city's pissed off at us, and I'm going, hey, we've been in touch with you. Like we as the owners doing everything we can to do the right thing the right way, and someone else chose to skip a couple of steps.
Right.
And now trying to amend those fences. Now the city's taking their time to come back out to do their inspection. Now, as part of that, there's also this learning curve. There has not been a distillery in the city of Elkhart in 100 years. So outside of you, you're the only person I know of that was around at that time, and I don't think you were in Indiana. So there's a learning curve with I'm having to teach them and some things, and they probably don't necessarily like it, but thankfully I feel like I'm doing it in the right way. But like the first one was because they see the still's got some parts, like you can't put that together. You need a licensed plumber to do that. And I had to explain to them, look, you realize the still's going to be taken apart and put back together again all the time. I mean, you've got to clean it.
We got to clean it, right? Yeah.
And you're telling me I have to have a plumber come out every time I'm going to clean it? Well, yeah, you've got to. I said, well, let's back up. So there's 4 types of heating that you can do with a still. One is it's jacketed and there's oil in it, and you heat up the oil, and therefore it heats up the still. The second is, again, it's jacketed and there's steam. I imagine the oil's probably installed by a plumber. I don't know. The steam was definitely a plumber. The third way is through open flame. So most people would use natural gas, just like you would for your stove. And you would have a plumber install that.
Yeah, don't mess with gas.
Right. And then the next is having heating elements, which is what we're using. And we had a licensed electrician come in and do that. All I have to do is plug it in.
Right.
And then he was like, oh, okay, I get it. So then the next one that we're on is like, well, you have to have a grease trap. I don't have food. There's no oil. There's no animal fats. Like, that's the reason for the grease trap. Oh, no, you have to have it. The code says, and I'm like, but the code is there for when you serve food. The only thing going down that drain is water. That's it. Because if alcohol goes down there, I just lost a lot of money.
Right. So, yeah, it's in my best interest not to mess that up.
Yeah, I'm not putting alcohol down there. Like, here's the process. They're like, oh, well, what about from your, this thing over here? You got the grain. I said, there's a grain bag goes over it. So as I'm cleaning it, it gets in there because all that spent grain we're donating to the farmers. They need feed. Here you go.
Right.
Spent grain. So they still haven't. So they called someone else out. Which is prior to that, they're like, well, the health department says this. I'm like, here's the email from the health department. I'm exempt. There's no food. So I'm like, why don't you call him? His name's, Matt Bottoms. Here's his phone number at the health department. And so I wound up talking to Matt, and he's just like, well, nobody wants to sign off on something they don't truly know the answers to.
Right.
I'm like, okay. So now we have a different person in the city come out and to kind of see, all right, are we exempt or not? Now, she did make a good point. She goes, look, regardless, these 2 applications need to be on file, and then we'll say exempt. But you just got to go through this process. I'm like, hey, no problem. But why didn't someone tell me this 2 months ago?
Right.
They
don't know, right? They don't know.
Yeah.
They're figuring out as they go, right?
Yeah.
All of you are figuring this out as you go.
Right. And I'm like, okay. So I'm like, she was down there. We walked her through the whole operations, how each thing goes. And she's like, okay, these are the things I really want you to put on this application, and get it back to me. I got it back to her like in an hour. Boom. She's like, all right, we're going to get this through the process pretty quick. Actually, her first response was, wow, that was fast. I'm like, I'm not messing around.
Right. Yeah. I got whiskey to make. Get out of my way.
I'm like, I went through the hardest part, which is getting past the state. The easiest part's getting past the federal side of it, which I thought would take the longest.
There's tax dollars in it. They want their money.
Yeah. The state inspection was much, much, much more difficult. These other pieces are all that we're having issues with are all very, very solvable. And I'm not, it's
the local stuff's easy. I mean, it's just, they got to wrap their arms around something they don't know how to. And then once they can imagine it, they can sign off on everything.
Yeah.
You just made it really easy for the next person.
Yeah. Which I hope there'll be plenty. I hope we'll be teaching a bunch of them how to make it. And this is a big thing that I found. So to not be afraid to do something different. And we went and visited, I don't know, I think pretty close to 20 different.
I remember you talking about a lot of positive experience you had with everybody.
Yeah, I've only really had now 2 negatives, but I just kept thinking to myself, why is it that everyone just keeps, even with a lot of these micro distillers, why do they keep doing the same thing that everyone else is doing? This doesn't make sense to me.
Right.
And then I'm like, I said, I think we're going to do it this way. And, the missus is like, no, no one else is doing that. I said, I know that, but I know how to make beer. The only difference between beer and whiskey, because it starts off as beer, is we just don't add hops. We don't want to be bitter. That's not the goal of whiskey. So why aren't they doing this? Why are they using, garbage, what's called distiller's malt, which is the worst part of barley, right? And then they use a very generic yeast that goes really fast. So I'm going, well, there's an adage, good, fast, cheap, pick 2. So I'm going, this is cheap grain, and they want it to ferment fast. The probability of it being good is going to be small, right? Which is why they have to age it longer and all these kind of things, because they got to. So then we found these folks down in southern Indiana, and it's called the Spirits of French Lick. And they confirmed everything that I had been thinking, which is they're making beer first. And I think the difference is what they've done down there is that they actually started off as a vineyard. And the winery, because it was doing so well, wound up funding the distillery.
Right.
And so we're talking to them down there, and they're making beer. And it is some of the most, they have this one that's got, it's 6 grains in it. It's corn, wheat, oats, kasha, and rye. It is the most interesting bourbon I have ever had because it's got a toastiness flavor to it.
Very cool.
And I'm like, this has been, now I'm not going to use that recipe, but what he confirmed in all this is don't use distiller's malt.
Well, high quality ingredients and everything, right?
Yeah.
You know, even let's do a restaurant thing. You've got McDonald's burgers, and then pick one of the top end people that what are they using? Shake Shack, everything's organic, right? Never frozen, all this other stuff, right? Quality ingredients in anything. Quality ingredients in relationships matter. Quality ingredients in thing. I mean, and if you want to use crap ingredients, you're going to get a crap result.
Yep. Now, the one thing that he's doing, which I think is, I'm this is not my area of expertise, but he definitely still confirms it. I'm like, why would you not use like the fast yeast? Well, he actually goes and cultivates yeast. And I thought, I'm like, well, I used to do that for beer, but how do you, like, I don't know what, like, for me, I don't know that I want to do that because I don't know what the results are. Like when I go to look at different beer yeasts, I know some of how that yeast is going to react and what types of flavors it's going to instill upon the grain. And I don't have that much cash to waste a lot of things to cultivate the yeast to go, oh, well, what's this going to do?
Right. And use hope as a strategy that it's actually going to work.
Right. Now, maybe at some point we start making some money, I can do some more experimentation. But in the meantime, I've confirmed to myself, I'm not using distiller's yeast. Just not going to do it. I'm going to start this off as this is going to be beer. And if it turns out to be where it's a good beer, then it's probably going to be a great whiskey.
Right. That's awesome.
But it's, again, if I believe that if you keep doing the same things that everyone else, there's no differentiation and you have no chance at success except for luck or hope. Right.
But it's the same thing. Like I know your personality, and that when you guys are up and running, you want new people to stop by and you want to have the opportunity to, even just what you were talking about through the permitting process and thing. It's like, hey, these are all the things you're going to need to do that they don't know to do. Right. And you think you ever hear the story of Toyota when they first built an American plant?
I don't think so. I might, but
they showed up. Now they're making cars, and obviously Toyota's one of the best selling car manufacturers in the world. They have really high quality, and so what they noticed over time was that like folks from GM, folks from Ford, folks from Chrysler would show up and they do the tour, and they got to the point where they were taking it as a great compliment, but they also knew that it couldn't be replicated in the U.S. And they would end up handing the manual to their competitors on the way out. And they were like, what's this? I go, this is how we do everything. You guys are walking here taking notes. We'll just give you the manual. You can have it. And they're like, why would you do that? Because they're like, you can have how we do it. You don't have the why of what we do. You don't have our culture, right? You don't have what we are. Right? And I think that is getting to the why of it all. If you can impart that on the next person, you're gonna shortcut their potential to be successful. It'll take it from if it takes you 13 months or 15 months in total, maybe you can get somebody to a year.
Yeah.
All right. And be proud of that fact. Because here's the thing. I mean, it's not like it's a zero-sum game, especially with alcohol. Right, you can be successful, and somebody else can be successful.
Absolutely, it's the way I explain it to people in this. I'm like, look, most people that are into whiskey, and some people that are into rums and gin do the same thing. I don't know anyone that's truly does this with vodka. Like if they do something with vodka, they typically just stay with one. But if they're into gins or into rums or into whiskeys, they tend to have more because they have different, flavors.
Right. Yeah. They got one vodka, and then they got their backup for when they run out of that one.
Yeah, and right? they may have flavored vodkas, but I mean that's I'm just going straight vodka here. Well, they'll have 6 or 7 of them.
Right.
Different brands. I'm going. I just want to be one of the 6 or 7.
Right. And you want to be on somebody's liquor cart.
Yeah, that's it.
Right. I mean, that's it. And I think that's the thing because as we've proved over the years, I don't want to drink the same thing every day.
No,
right?
I don't. I mean, even here at home, I've got I've got several. I mean, I'm definitely. I think I probably have 14 different whiskeys upstairs.
Right. But you're also in a thing where there's, I hate to say it this way, but it's also work, right? You're testing, you're trying, you're like, okay, how can I figure out how these people did what they do, even if it's a big one? But you do find yourself gravitating more towards the smaller craft distillers, though, I'm sure.
I at least try to. Right. And there are some things like there's not a whole lot of small Scotch distillers here in the United States. So when I'm having Scotch, it's kind of difficult because they don't have the coin to export it to the United States. And so you would only get that if you were in.
If you went to Scotland,
right. But here in the U.S., I pay a lot of attention to the label when I see something new, and then I go and look them up.
Right.
And I go, okay, how big are they? When did they start? Oh, you've only been around for 8 years. Okay, perfect. I want to try this. Let's see how this is.
Right.
What did you do? And then there's so much smoke and mirrors. So much of what you see in the liquor store is coming out of Lawrenceburg, Indiana. And so basically what that means is it's white labeled product. It's not.
Yeah, it's somebody's having a marketing effort. They're not an artisan.
Yep.
I think it's like, I think you bring up a great point, like in success, right? And it's one of the things I did when I was out at the trade show a couple of weeks ago. Is I had all but one of my direct reports out there with me, and I said, go start walking around. I walked around one afternoon, and I went to a company that's, probably 5 or 6 years ahead of us, and they're selling UAVs over in Europe. And I started talking to their CEO, and he's like, "Oh, what do you do?" I said, "Oh, I run the company over there, and we're doing our thing, right?" And he was very open with me about what success looks like and how to beat it in this thing. And I was like, and he's like, we need more competent people in this size of drawing. And he was, and they're doing quite well. And then I went over to another company. What I find is in the UAVs we sell, because we don't, we have a quadcopter, but on a VTOL drone, you'll see there's a lot of really cool designs. Like I say, some people build F-16s, some people build C-130s. I build C-130s. Right? Some people build their C-130 to look like an F-16, and it has very great eye appeal. Curb appeal is great on it, but what we're finding out is a lot of them don't fly.
Yeah.
Right? Because they either don't have the money, they don't have it fully vetted out. Everybody can build a model, right? And so one of the things we did when we went out there was we relied heavily on video behind us of our drones flying all the time. We fly them every day, right? But what I had my direct reports do is I said, walk around. I said, why don't you go over there? That's what success looks like. Talk to their CEO. He's going to tell you everything you want to know. That's what we're going to do, right? Because there's no secret in doing this, right? It's about, some of it is in the same thing. We have to be certified by the government, right? The FAA has to do it. So everybody tries to avoid that, right? And I basically validated a lot of what I thought was correct in being correct. Why? Because I found somebody who was a giving human being. Uh-huh. Right? That, like you said, has walked the path. And he was like, hey, don't step here, don't step there. And I think that is the definition of true success. And I say, I said 5 years, that's what we want to look somewhat like that. We're going to chart our own path and everything, but we're going to do those things. We are going to help other companies. We're going to do what we need to do to be successful, because that's ultimately how we're going to win. And I used the Toyota example when I took over there. I was like, we'll give people how to do it, but they're not going to have our culture. And I want every person we hire, I want your decisions about whether or not we hire a person to be partially informed on what type of culture fit. Because we can find smart engineers and great artists and fabricators everywhere, right? And we have to work at it, but there's more people that want to work with us than we can hire, right? I said, so our job is to find the right culture fit so we don't destroy who we are as a growing company.
Absolutely true. And I think the part that you really hit on, which to me is a metaphor for in jiu-jitsu, as my training partner gets better, so too do I.
Right.
And I want the competition. I'm not afraid to tell people, hey, this is how I'm doing it. Because what they don't have is the passion that we have for it.
Right.
They don't have the Mrs. Taste Buds. Right. So the challenge that I actually am wrestling with is, because part of this is I'm never going to sell this company. I have zero desire of doing it. It's just going to go to one of the 6 kids. And I'm going, how can that taste bud be replicated to the next generation? That's actually what I'm trying to wrestle with now, is how's that going to get done? Because everyone's taste buds are different.
Right.
And how are they going to pick up on those nuances to know that rum is ready, that gin is ready, that whiskey is ready?
It's the sommelier effect.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's some wines out there that I drink. I'm like, okay, their sommelier had their tongue cut out because it's horrible.
Right.
You know?
Absolutely.
And I'm not talking like $5 bottles of wine. I'm talking, not really talking, but something that's should be a good representation of your vineyard.
Yeah, absolutely. And so but I think about all those success points. Like, to me, the first success point that we're now waiting, because we've got through a lot of these other success points. The next success point is being able to now make any of the products, that first thing coming off the line. All right, how did we do? Because, we did a lot of stuff in class. Can we replicate what we did in class on our own?
Right.
We'll still do a 5-gallon batch to see how does this work. So it'll probably be longer. I would like to get it to, by the end of the year, be able to use all of the big equipment, but might not. But I would like to do that. But the first part is, can we just replicate what we did in class?
Right.
If we can, then now let's move it to the 60-gallon still versus.
But it's the same thing. Like, in my mind, like, what think about, like, building a software company. Like, what you're doing is you're building the MVP right now.
Yeah.
Right. And once you get the MVP, then the design thinking, not necessarily in series, but concurrently, can be, how do we scale?
Yep.
Right. And that's the next success to build on. Anybody can build one of these things. How do I build 100?
Right. And that's like, I've got it planned out for the next 18 months. And 18 months is a pretty important number for me, in that and going through all this, we found out Indiana's got some weird laws. We can't be open to the general public to come into our facility to do a tasting.
Right. Tell me that.
Yeah, we have to wait 18 months and get an artisan distillery permit, which is perfectly fine. It actually, I think, helps in a way, because then we can, we'll have more time, and at that point we can have some aged whiskeys that'll be there. But I don't look at that as a problem. The missus was like, "Oh my gosh!" I was like, "No one knows who we are. Like, we got to go out. We got to go to them."
Right.
To get them to taste stuff. They're not going to come to us. But there's some loopholes. I can have restaurant managers, anyone that would be potentially a business customer or a potential investor can come in and do a private tasting, because they're either looking to potentially invest, or they need to. We have to train them on the product. So I'm like, that's enough.
Yeah. No, I think what you're doing is fascinating. If I did anything like that, because I have a good teammate buddy of mine. He owns Bold Mariner Brewery, and they're killing it out here on the East Coast. And he's always coming up with new beer and stuff like that. And he had a mentor when he got out of the Navy that had done kind of walked this road and really provided him a thing. And he's growing. He's doing the right things. And we were talking about, he's like, is this something would entertain you? I said, if I ever did anything in the in the liquor industry, I'd like to do wine. Right. I like the agronomy of it. I like that. To me, that would be a fascinating passion thing to get involved in, is to do wine. I was like, there's and I haven't ordered a bottle of this yet, but Drew Bledsoe was the quarterback that got hurt, so Brady could take over by the Patriots when he got out of football. And
the modern day Wally Pipp. Right.
Totally. But to have the he had the nose for it, right? Because you'll listen to players talk about, even when he was playing, like, they would go out and they're drinking thing, and he's always finding the bottle of wine. He makes wine out of Walla Walla, Washington now, and it's called Doubleback Winery. And I've looked on there, and it's just a function. I've got to get on there and click and buy a bottle of his cab. But it's you can tell, like, that he's complete passion about it every day of the week. Right. And I think that, and I like it's being outside, kind of I like the climate that grapes are growing, all of that to me. And I just think that's really cool. Do I have a sommelier nose / mouth for it? No, I'd probably have to hire that. Right. But, like I said, certain things you can buy, certain things you have to do yourself. Right. And I think I can buy somebody that's got a better, I know what I like, but I think when you're talking about the taste bud thing and like that is like to be able to have the nose or the taste buds for the general public. I think that's how you become wildly successful.
Absolutely. And actually our next business that we plan on doing next is a vineyard. We happen to have, a lot of people don't realize it, but we're along that 47th parallel here in Indiana, up here by the Great Lakes. And there's
I thought your next thing was going to invest in into a shine factory in some rural part of the country with Stoney.
No, he might be competition. So there's no competition. That is some shitty corn liquor he's making down there. I'm gonna have to teach him how to do this the right way.
Stoney, I'm with you, brother. If you're watching today.
But we plan on doing a vineyard. It's like, okay, we just because so then from the vineyard, a brewery, and then a restaurant, because that's the whole aspect of all of the alcohol we want to be only from our stuff.
Right.
Which we can do because it's all on that same aspect. And then the consulting company, because we want to consistently train everyone on what our culture is across all of the companies.
Right.
That's the eventual final stage plan. But things may come up in different order. I think for anyone that's looking to be successful, you can't be so rigid in going, it has to happen in the order you think it needed to happen in.
Well, I think that's life, though, right? I mean, everybody gets wedded to the idea that I thought something was going to happen on this day and it didn't happen on this day, and so now I'm going to be a fanatical pain in the ass about it.
Right. It's taking the sports analogy, your playbook should fit your environment. Don't try to force your playbook onto the environment.
Right. And nowhere is that more evident than when you get an offensive coordinator or a head coach in football that runs a system, and they've consistently got to go find a system guy.
Yep.
Right. And now in today's football, because of how the kids are coming out of college, RPOs and all the other things, you're getting more of that in there because that's the quarterbacks that are rising to the top. So they've had to thing. But, when you've got, for a while it was like, well, I've got my starting quarterback is Brady. I can't go get an RPO guy because we can't flip the script on the offense at bats. We've got to go find another guy that can fit in that system. And I think that's becoming a little more fluid. Or if somebody shows up and, hey, my offensive line's terrible this year. We're going to do the best we can, but guess what? That quarterback better be mobile because he's going to have to run for his life. He's going to have to sprint out and get out. There was the whole problem back in the day with Doug Flutie because he's 5'5", or 5'9" on paper. He couldn't. The offensive linemen were much different back then. They weren't as athletic. They were just big because the running game was a thing. It was like create a hole and let somebody go by you. His whole thing, when they finally realized in the NFL that if they have him sprint out, he can be successful because now he can see the whole field.
Yep.
Right. Instead of trying to fit somebody into that. Yep. And I think to a certain extent, like the Patriots this year with when they drafted Mac Jones, who I think is going to do well, is they went back and they said, we got to get a guy that has a bit of athleticism, but still understands and can make all the reads and be on time like Brady was. Right. And that, I think if it's successful, that's if he continues to be above average and grow, he'll be fine. But, it's always the old adage, don't be the guy that takes over for the guy, be the guy the next guy after that. All right. And, again, like last year, they had Cam Newton. Cam Newton's game is not Tom Brady's game, or vice versa. They're both great quarterbacks. They've both been league MVPs. And I think in life, finding people that either you have to, as a leader, you have to build your system to who you have, because what's the biggest constraint? Money. Hey, I want all these guys over here, but I can't afford all those guys. Who can I get that's competent and fits our culture? Yep. Right. Later on, maybe I go get those, or maybe those folks are going to grow, right? Because I think kind of the end of this is like, when you want to talk about leading into success is treat everybody like you want them to be, not like they are. Because if you treat them like they are, they're gonna perform for you. They're gonna give you exactly what you expected of them. If you expect wild greatness from them and things they can't even imagine, they're going to do that as well. And most people do that for other people. They don't do it for themselves.
It's true.
Right? Or thing is, they show up and they're lucky to be where they've gotten because through some freak relationship or something, they've gotten where they've gotten. And now they're so invested in holding on to that theory in that way, they make bad decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the greatest example is, and we hear it anytime you fly, in the event of an emergency, an oxygen mask is going to be deployed.
Yep.
Put your oxygen mask on first before you assist someone else.
I was coaching an executive, and we were talking about working out, and he was like, "Oh, I just got too much to do to run the business. Blah blah. I got to take care of all my people." I go, "Great, you're gonna die here in the next few years if you don't change your behavior." And I said, whose oxygen mask gets put on first, right?
Yep, that's exactly right.
Hey, by the way, for those of you that are interested, Sornex Squat-tober starts coming up here in the first. Yep, and then Deadcember. It's Squat-tober and Deadcember. We get the deadlifts into December.
I try to do anything I can to not have to use my knees after 6 knee surgeries, and which was really quite funny looking at the thermal scan that I did. And of course, it comes back and it says, all these issues with on my left side, and I'm like, yeah, well, 6 knee surgeries, broken ankle, got a little bit going on. So
you're gonna walk like a cowboy when you're 80.
Yeah. So the only thing that I do from a leg perspective is I'll do leg press.
Yep.
But I won't do, squats, deadlifts, anything along those lines, right? Like, nope, no.
I can see where squats. If you did hex bar deadlifts, I think you could probably do them.
Yeah, I haven't
them safely.
I've never tried them. So I'll do the leg extensions.
Yep.
And the
leg curls and stuff like that.
Yeah. Those ones I'm good with, mainly because I'm just so worried that, like I feel like I could sneeze wrong and I'm gonna, tear a ligament in that knee again.
Oh, my pancreas! Ow! I think I hurt myself.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly what I feel like. There's a lot of times where I'm just like, which also been doing a lot of cryotherapy.
Yep, big fan of that.
Love it.
Big fan of that.
I was at a negative 178 degrees for 3 minutes the other day. So the highest level they'll go.
When you walk out of there, they put you on a plate vibrator?
No.
You stand on the plate vibrator for about 30 seconds or anything like that, and it really starts to help. So you cool your body down, and now how do we want to start warming it up, right? Because you want that differential, right? And so you go really cool, and it has all those positive effects. Now you want to heat your body up slowly, and that plate vibrator starts moving everything around. You just stand there, it does the work, and you just stand there for like 30 seconds to a minute, and it starts getting everything going again. And then the place that I used to go to, they also have the red light therapy. They're like suntan beds, but you lay in there, and it's like you do that, and then like Jorah, she'll do the cryotherapy. She'll get on the plate vibrator, and then she'll do the compression. Compression pants.
Yep.
And those, but all of those, I said, any of that stuff is fantastic. Like we were talking about at the beginning, I go to a doctor, he's going to tell you, oh, it's all hooey. Well, it can't be, right? I mean, who is it? Tony Robbins has like an old freezer, like one of those, the big like lid freezers or coffin freezers, and he's got water in there. It's 54 degrees. He's got it filled with water. And one of his he's got a professional setup like in his main home. He was showing some island that he was on, and he just bought one of those like those big like Foot Locker freezers, and he's got the water in there at 54 degrees. And the first thing he does when he gets out of bed is he goes in there and sits in there. Then he gets up and he jumps right into hot water, right, or warmer water, right. And I think there's more than casual evidence of the positive, physiological but also neurological effects of cold therapy.
Yeah. And so I probably won't have, cold therapy, because I'm not about to sit in an ice bath. Way too many of those. I can, I think actually they can be a little bit more dangerous if you don't pay attention. But at the new house, we'll have, so we already have an infrared sauna, but then I'm also going to put in a steam sauna. Okay. Because they just do different things.
Yes.
But that's the next one. It's like, all right, it'll be, I don't miss my sauna days. Like to me, you know, like I'll do the infrared sauna. It only goes up to 140 degrees, but you know, I'm in there.
You got to sweat.
So
you got to open the pores up, let all the toxins out.
Yep, absolutely.
Or not.
I mean, with as much whiskey I'm drinking, I need to get it out. So,
hey, you're a distiller, right?
Yeah, exactly.
When I was in Bermuda, I met the heirs to the Gosling rum fortune, and one of them is a financial manager, and the other one runs the Gosling business. And they're first cousins. Their mothers were sisters. And when I met Hugh, he introduced me to his first cousin, who he goes, he's just a drunk that runs a rum company.
Yeah.
Right. And I was like, yep. And you know, they're some of the wealthiest people out there.
Oh,
and
yeah.
They're super nice, right? But yeah, they don't miss their opportunity to have a drink.
Yeah, no, definitely not. So it keeps you in business.
Yeah, I'm not advocating that you stop.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, my friend. Well, thank you again for joining, and thank you for all those tuning in.
Pleasure as always, and we'll do it again next Sunday.
Yep, sounds good. Take care.
All right. Yep.
Bye.